The rise and deadly fall of Martin Cahill, the General. Imagine a world where crime is an art form, and the mastermind behind it is a man known only as the General. Martin Cahill was no small-time thief, but a criminal genius who engineered some of the most daring heists ever to have been pulled off against the state. But just how did this man, a boy from Dublin's slum, rise to infamy to command respect and fear in equal measure? We peel back the layers of Cahill's life to view the astonishing rise to power, the alliances forged, and the deadly feuds sealing his fate. What motivated him to go against the same organizations that controlled the underworld? The reason behind such a shocking demise. Welcome, or welcome back, to True Gangster Stories, as we unravel the rise and deadly fall of Martin Cahill, the General, a story of ambition, betrayal, and tragedy that literally keeps you on the edge of your seat. Ready to be taken into Dublin's dark side? Let's go. Early life and background. Martin Cahill was born into the heart of Dublin's Greenville Street, a street marked by poverty and struggle, on May 23, 1949. He was the second of 12 children to Patrick Cahill, who kept lighthouses, and his wife, Agnes Sheehan. Life was hard from the outset, with the family's finances at best marginal. Young Martin quickly learned that getting by often depended on liberties taken with the law. By the tender age of 8, Martin had already dipped his feet into petty criminality. First, it was petty theft of food to fill the hollowness at the bottom of his family's bellies. These experiences shaped him into a determined and resourceful individual, a trait that will define his life. Growing up in a slum made Martin the man he would be in many ways. The streets were mean, and most kids in Martin's situation had to engage in crime, more out of necessity rather than just a choice. His life of poverty pushed him on the road to notoriety and infamy. From a young age, survival for him meant outsmarting the law rather than following it. This early exposure to crime set the stage for one of the most infamous criminal careers in Irish history. The young Martin Cahill was a lively and restless child, with rebellion seemingly woven into his very nature. Raised in the rough neighbourhoods of Dublin, he quickly developed a dislike for the school environment. Skipping classes became his norm, and he spent most of the time out on the streets with his brothers. These shared experiences created an unbreakable bond between them, strengthened by the struggles they faced together. Almost naturally, their lives took a turn towards petty crime. They began breaking into homes and shops, stealing whatever they could get their hands on. At 15, Martin's adventurous spirit drove him to dream of a brighter future. He set his sights on joining the Royal Navy as a way to escape his bleak existence and start fresh. Filled with determination, he walked into a recruiting centre, only to have his hopes crushed. His growing history of petty crimes had caught up with him, leading to his rejection. The sting of that rejection cut deep and became a pivotal moment in Martin's life. From small-time thefts to minor hustles, Martin quickly became adept at navigating the criminal underworld. Yet, his journey into this shadowy world was only just beginning. The rise of the General. Martin Cahill's rise to infamy was not merely a result of age, but of his evolution into a criminal mastermind known as the General. This title wasn't just a catchy nickname, it was a testament to his extraordinary skill in planning and executing high-profile robberies that left both law enforcement and fellow criminals stunned. One of the most infamous heists occurred in 1983 when Cahill and his gangs targeted O'Connor's jewellery. After months of meticulous planning, they pulled off a daring raid that promised a reward of over £2 million in gold and jewels, a staggering sum for the time. This single act solidified Cahill's reputation among the elite of the criminal underworld. The adrenaline rush he must have felt after such a high-stakes operation, successfully managing every risk, wasn't just thrilling, it was proof of his razor-sharp mind. Cahill's ambition didn't stop there. In 1986, he orchestrated one of the boldest art thefts in history at Rossborough House, stealing paintings worth fortunes. This audacious crime showcased not only his immense daring, but also his deep understanding of the vulnerabilities within high-security systems. Each heist was a calculated move on a chessboard where the stakes were nothing less than life and death. Cahill's ability to outwit law enforcement became legendary. Police were so desperate to catch him that they created special task forces like the notorious Tango Squad, solely dedicated to his capture. Yet, despite their relentless efforts, Cahill remained elusive, consistently outmaneuvering them. His story captured headlines, painting him as a modern-day Robin Hood, but one with a far darker and more dangerous edge. Key alliances and feuds. As Martin Cahill's star rose, so did the shadows around him. Success in the criminal underworld often breeds enemies, and Cahill was no exception. He formed alliances with notorious figures like John Traynor and Martin the Viper Foley, creating a formidable trio that ruled Dublin's dark alleys and hidden corners. Together, they orchestrated some of the most audacious heists Ireland had ever seen, leaving law enforcement scrambling to keep up. Their bond was forged in the fires of ambition and greed, each man bringing his unique skills to the table. Traynor, with his insider knowledge of banks, and Foley, known for his ruthless tactics, complemented Cahill's strategic genius. This alliance allowed them to pull off high-stakes robberies that not only filled their coffers, but also solidified their reputation as Dublin's most feared criminals. However, the very alliances that propelled Cahill to the top also sowed the seeds of his downfall. In a world where trust is a rare commodity, loyalty can quickly turn into betrayal. As their empire grew, so did tensions with rival gangs and factions, particularly the IRA. Cahill's refusal to pay protection money and his dealings with loyalist paramilitaries painted a target on his back. His refusal to pay protection money to the IRA was a bold move that ignited a fierce conflict, setting the stage for a dramatic conflict in Dublin's criminal underworld. Known for his audacity, Cahill famously rebutted their demands for gold, a decision that would haunt him in ways he could never have imagined. This act of defiance was not just a financial dispute, it was a declaration of war against an organization that wielded significant power and influence. In 1993, things took a dark turn when Cahill orchestrated the kidnapping of James Lacey, an audacious move that showcased both his cunning and his desperation. The abduction was intended to send a message demonstrating his willingness to go to extreme lengths to assert his dominance. However, this risky maneuver also put him squarely in the crosshairs of rival factions who were eager to exploit any weakness. As Lacey and his wife were seized outside their home, the situation escalated quickly. Cahill's gang demanded a staggering ransom of 10 million Irish pounds, illustrating just how high the stakes had become. But beneath the surface of this high-stakes drama lay a brewing storm. Cahill's actions not only attracted the attention of law enforcement, but also intensified the ire of the IRA, who viewed him as a growing threat that needed to be neutralized. The kidnapping showcased Cahill's audacity, but also revealed how isolated he had become in a world where loyalty was often fleeting. As tensions mounted, it became clear that his refusal to bow to the IRA and his brazen criminal tactics would ultimately lead him down a path from which there would be no return. In this dangerous game of cat and mouse, every decision carried weighty consequences, and the line between power and peril grew increasingly blurred. The downfall. With Cahill's notoriety came restless pursuit from law enforcement. So determined to bring him to justice, the Garda formed a special surveillance unit, affectionately known as the Tango Squad. This elite team was not just a response to Cahill's growing notoriety, but a full-scale operation designed to monitor his every move 24/7. Imagine a phalanx of the finest officers armed with the latest in surveillance paraphernalia, shadowing Cahill and his gang as they plot their next high-stakes heist. The stakes were high, the tension palpable. Cahill, known for his meticulous planning and artful schemes, became acutely aware of these watchful eyes. He was given the call sign Tango 1, a title which made it perfectly clear he was the target of this unprecedented police operation. The Tango Squad set up shop right in Cahill's neighborhood, even put in surveillance unit in the homes next door to his. They were everywhere. Hidden cameras, undercover agents, constant monitoring. This turned Cahill's life into some sort of cat-and-mouse game. The closer it felt like they were getting to him, the more he tried to weave his way out of their clutches. In one brazen act of resistance, Cahill ordered his men to slash the tires of nearly 200 cars in a single night as a symbolic act of defiance to show that he wouldn't be intimidated. But that just ratcheted up the pressure on him, an unmistakable sign that the stakes were rising. As the days passed, it was a tug of war, with the pressure increasing on both sides. The Garda were determined to break up Cahill's empire, and he responded with every nail that came his way. This growing tug of war would reach a tragic culmination all too soon, as both the forces of the law and Cahill realized that this particular game of crime and punishment, only one could stand at the top. Invariably, it is in the wake of betrayal a shadow, the thing that is lurking around the corner of one's eye, biding its time. In the case of Martin Cahill, alias the General, the great Dublin crime boss, this was more than a possibility. It was fact. Relaxed, free-spending, happy to be regarded as in control, two former friends from within his close-knit group of acquaintances, John Traynor and John Gilligan, began plotting against him as they entered the heady and lucrative world of narcotics dealing. Greedier and more frightened, they seized a chance to snatch power. Cahill had always acted according to some kind of code. He despised dealing drugs and had focused his operations on high-end heists and burglaries. But as Traynor and Gilligan continued to build their extensive crime empire, they became embroidered in a various game in which loyalty lasted only as long as it provided expedient, and getting ahead sometimes meant getting killed. Organized crime is a world wherein alliances are like sand underfoot, constantly shifting. The men who fought by your side today may be your worst enemies tomorrow. So too, when Cahill sought to reassert authority in his fiefdom, he started going on a full frontal collision course with his old pals. They were paying protection money to the IRA, one of the Irish terrorist groups, and simultaneously snitching on Cahill for importing heroin, a drug that the IRA abhorred. This decision was not for survival. This was a cold-hearted decision taken to eliminate an opponent who gradually became a danger. However, it was to save their burgeoning drug empire that the desperation led to the betrayal of Traynor and Gilligan. Still, it unrivaled one grimy fact about the crime world. Trust is a commodity few can afford. The tension mounted, the scene set for a violent confrontation that finally sealed Cahill's fate. In a world where loyalty plays second fiddle to ambition, Martin Cahill realized a little too late that even friends can turn into the most deadly of foes in the blink of an eye. There was no such thing as loyalty in Cahill's world. It wasn't because of the effort put in by the law enforcers that his fall finally came about, but through people upon whom he had trusted. The murder of Martin Cahill. Suddenly, the streets of Dublin would have felt the aftershocks of an act of violence that would reverberate throughout the city's underworld for decades to come, on August 18th, 1994. Martin Cahill, better known as the General, was gunned down in an assassination attempt that seemed more the stuff of hardcore crime fiction. He had been living in Swan Grove and was on his way to return a borrowed video, Delta Force 3: The Killing Game, when death came calling at the junction of Oxford Road and Charleston Road. It was to be a nondescript sort of day, the kind that would not raise any eyebrows. But then, from behind a mask of normality, the killer, a hitman dressed like a worker, advanced towards Cahill and began firing a .357 Magnum revolver. The bullets striking him in the face and upper torso. He died all but instantly, leaving behind a legacy as fabled as it was infamous. The news of Cahill's murder sent shockwaves through Dublin's underworld. He wasn't just any criminal. He was a figure who had jumped through the hoops of organised crime with great aplomb and mystery. With his outlandish, daring heists and clever tactics, Cahill had built an empire that commanded respect and created fear among his peers. His murder begged questions as to who would be responsible for such an audacious hit. Within hours, the IRA called in to claim the killing, citing Cahill's link into a Portadown unit of the Ulster Volunteer Force. It spoke of a dangerous game of alliances and betrayal that had typified Cahill's life. Another theory was that his former associates, John Gilligan and John Traynor, had conspired against him because of their burgeoning drug trafficking operations. When Cahill had called for his share, they allegedly turned to the IRA to have him murdered, a move that would see to his eventual fatal end. Yet, despite this, Cahill's family continually insisted that he hated the narcotics trade and wanted out. Years later, his daughter, Frances Cahill, wrote in her memoir of how her father tried to avoid drugs at all costs, showing a different side to Cahill's nature, one that wasn't quite as one-dimensional as his criminal profile would have indicated. Following a Roman Catholic Requiem Mass, Martin Cahill was buried in consecrated ground at Mount Jerome Cemetery. But even in death, he wasn't left alone. In 2001, his headstone was vandalized and split into two, the final word on a life that had been nothing if not provocative. In a strange twist, both the IRA and the INLA took responsibility for his murder, a measure of how far he'd embedded himself into the Dublin underworld. The murder of Cahill signalled the end of an era in more ways than one. The brutal reality of gangland Dublin had never been shown so starkly. Martin Cahill today is remembered both as a criminal's criminal and a kind of anti-hero, the man who lived outside the law and was finally killed by its shadowy representatives. His life has been dramatized in several books and movies that keep people amazed and build an idea of crime in Ireland. Martin Cahill's life is a grim reminder of how fine a line exists between genius and madness, how one meteoric rise could end in utter tragedy. What do you think of Cahill's legacy? Villain or misunderstood genius? Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments section below. If you like this deep dive into true crime history, be sure to subscribe so you can catch more tales from the darker side of humanity.